travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I'm the local disaster tour guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who is clearly using the effortless captivation metamagic feat. That's a lie. We all know that's a lie. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today I'm going to be doing something of an experimental video that I'm hoping is going to be the first part in a new series called The Overlooked Strengths of Pathfinder 2e. And in particular today, I want to talk about how Pathfinder 2nd Edition deals with the concept of metamagic and why I think it is particularly brilliant game design. But before we talk about that, let's step back and talk about why I'm having this conversation. I've wanted to do this topic for a while. I love analyzing RPGs. I think any fan of this channel knows that. And every game has different strengths, has different weaknesses, and when you analyze the strengths and weaknesses of different games, you can learn a lot about game design and storytelling, and really how to improve this hobby as a whole. Now, I love Pathfinder 2e, and there are a lot of things to love about Pathfinder 2e. It is my favorite game, but I think sometimes the gaming community often fixates on just one or two aspects of a given game and misses out on other elements that are, at least in my mind, worth taking the time to discuss. When it comes to Pathfinder 2e, you hear all kinds of people who talk about the 3-action economy. It is almost universally well loved. Even people who don't like Pathfinder 2e tend to say really good things about that action economy. It's a big part of the conversation. Stepping out further than that, when you're talking about Paizo, Paizo has a well-deserved reputation for writing really good settings and really good adventures. It's one of the things that they are well regarded for. But oftentimes we can be so caught up in talking about those big things that a lot of people have noted that we lose sight of some of the smaller things that go on inside of game design when there's a lot of cool stuff that we can observe and talk about. Now, to be perfectly honest, I've actually tried to do this video several times. Originally, I was going to do this big mega video where I talked about all the different things in Pathfinder 2e I felt were getting overlooked. But honestly, every time I tried to do that, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, and I ended up never publishing those videos. So I decided to take another crack at this topic and break the different topics that had caught my attention into their own individual videos and talk about the elements of game design that Paizo has done well in Pathfinder 2e and give them their time to shine separate from other conversations. I'm curious to see how this conversation goes, so definitely let me know what you think. I will say in regard to this specific video, this one is getting filmed back when I was having all of my COVID issues, so the quality of the video is a little bit lower than normal. Future videos in the series will hopefully be back to my usual setup and will hopefully look and sound a lot better, but just letting you know I am aware the setup's a little rough today. However, I do want to hear from you. Are you interested in this conversation, and would you like to explore more areas like we are exploring in this video? Please jump into the comment section, let me know what you think. Let me know what some overlooked strengths of Pathfinder 2e are that we can use in this series, and I will definitely include them in the conversation. But let's get started today and talk about the first overlooked strength of Pathfinder 2e, which is, in my opinion, metamagic. Now, metamagic is a concept that has been around in gaming for a while, and it is a pretty fun concept. It's basically the idea that a sufficiently talented or powerful spellcaster has the ability to play around with what their spells can do. Why should every spellcaster produce fireballs with the exact same size, exact same range, and exact same effect? Wouldn't it make sense that certain spellcasters would have the ability to modify the parameters of their fireball, maybe to use against more distant targets, maybe to deal more damage, or maybe just to blast a larger area when it goes off? Metamagic is, to be honest, a fun and intuitively engaging aspect of spellcasting that, in my opinion, usually isn't done well in most D20-based role-playing games. Like, there is a clear reason to have metamagic, And I think it is a beneficial thing that was brought into fantasy RPGs, but far too often, the way that metamagic is implemented inside of games, it ends up feeling stale and unfun. As a classic example, if you go back to D&D 3.0, 3.5, Pathfinder 1st Edition, those games required you to sacrifice a higher level spell slot in order to use metamagic in any fashion. So if you wanted to use Reach Spell, you would have to functionally level up whatever spell you were using and sacrifice a higher level spell to get that additional effect. And don't get me wrong, I understand the balance purpose in doing it that way. There is a logical reason to do that. But as a practical result, I played easily 2 decades of 3.0, 3.5 Pathfinder 1st Edition, and I can tell you that very few players ever truly used metamagic. The only one that really saw any consistent use at any of my gaming tables was Quicken Spell, and that one really only showed up late in campaigns when my players were wanting to fire off multiple spells in a given round. The loss of higher level spell slots felt like too big a punishment for most of my players, and metamagic, while it was a cool concept, ended up not really getting much use because the cost to use metamagic just felt too high. And I'll be honest, in most of my runs through Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous on my computer right now, I very rarely use metamagic with my spellcasters. It's not that it's not valid, it's just kind of, I don't feel the need to. There have been other attempts to use metamagic in different fantasy RPGs, but even then you see that other problems show up. For example, in D&D 5e, sorcerers can use metamagic through the expenditure of sorcery points. And that approach is nice in that you don't have to sacrifice higher level spell slots. I like that. But that creates another problem. You have to either play a sorcerer or multi-class into sorcerer if you want to use metamagic. That rule set solves one problem, but then creates another problem by restricting who can even use metamagic to begin with, and it feels very disingenuous to say there's only one class in the game that can innately use metamagic, that can play around with the parameters of their spells. This is something that metamagic runs into a lot. Metamagic is a fun concept. Spellcasters playing around with their magic is something you want to be able to do in a game, but how do you do it well? Pathfinder 2e, I think, answers that question by building metamagic off of its action economy. Now, we're not going to go into all of the reasons the action economy is great because, as I've said, action economy gets a lot of attention, but here's one of those small places where you can see how that big design choice pays out some very interesting dividends inside of the game. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, using metamagic usually is going to cost your character either an action or a free action. That's it. You're not sacrificing higher level spell slots. In most cases, you're not going to be burning resources. I think there may be a couple of options that require you to expend a focus point, but typically there's no additional resources that are going to be involved. You're just modifying the casting time in order to change what your spell does, and that actually feels right for what metamagic is, doesn't it? When we think about a spellcaster modifying the parameters of their spell, it kind of makes sense to imagine a spellcaster taking a few extra seconds to modify their incantation, change what they say, change how they move their hands, and in so doing, manipulate the outcome of the spell in a new and unique way. Tying metamagic to the action economy of the game creates a sensation where suddenly my players, and myself on the few occasions I get to be a player, we're a lot more interested in using metamagic. Asking a player to sacrifice higher level spell slots, that's a big ask, but saying, do you want to take an extra action to get this bonus effect with your spell? That feels a lot better and a lot more natural inside of the game. Suddenly you have the desired effect of metamagic options being paired with something that feels good, feels right, and doesn't cost so much that you're just like, I guess I'm not going to use this. That's one of the big things Paizo does right with Metamagic in Pathfinder 2e. The other big thing I think that Paizo did right here is changing the Metamagic list for different classes and different archetypes. In previous editions of the game, the vast majority of Metamagic options were the same from class to class to class to class. Reach spell, widen spell, quicken spell, these were options everybody had, and you might occasionally find one or two options that were limited to a specific class, but most Metamagic options were written in a way that they were available to everyone. Now, in Pathfinder 2e, you do still have those general Metamagic options that most, if not all, spellcasting classes can use. Reach spell is basically a universal Metamagic option for every spellcasting class in this game. There may be one or two classes that can't use it. Feel free to call me out in the comments if you need to. But you get the idea. There are basic options that most spellcasters can use, but then you turn around and you realize that in Pathfinder 2e, there are a lot of Metamagic options that are tailor-made to specific options inside of the game. Oh, you're a druid? Here's a Metamagic option called Sow Seed that allows you to plant your spell inside of a seed in the ground. That's the kind of thing you'd expect a druid to be able to do, and because they can tailor Metamagic feats to specific classes, it's a lot more flavorful and a lot more interesting. And here's one of the cool things about that. As far as I can tell, I believe every spellcasting class in Pathfinder 2e has at least one unique Metamagic option available to them. Wizards can take non-lethal spell. The Time Mage dedication from Dark Archive can metamagic their spells into the future. Certain ancestries have their own unique metamagic feats, like the Ifrit ancestry that can use fire magic that can turn the ground into hot coals that function as difficult terrain and damage people who walk through. Unique options are all over the place, and Paizo can customize metamagic to all sorts of different character options, which honestly makes sense. If metamagic is the idea that a spellcaster is playing with what their magic does, it would make sense that different spellcasters would play with magic in different ways. And I've just kind of scratched the surface here. There are over 90 different metamagic feats in Pathfinder 2e right now, at least according to Archives of Nethys. And you know Paizo has more in store, which means that these unique actions that can change spells in a myriad of different ways are only going to keep coming, allowing for a ton of diversity in the way that different heroes and villains are going to use their magic to impact the world around them. Pathfinder 2e is probably the first time I have seen metamagic implemented in a way that feels so intuitive, that is easy to use, and that allows players to really play with the parameter of their spells in fun and unique ways. Now, there is a little bit of a criticism of how Paizo handles metamagic here, in that the metamagic options are consistently locked behind feats, but because of retraining rules in Pathfinder 2e, characters can retrain their metamagic options, meaning that from week to week they have different ways to play with their spells, so it's not like a character is always locked into only this option or only these few options that they have taken. While the system is not perfect, it is at least flexible enough that players can still mess around with different options and truly get a feel for a lot of the different crazy things inside of the game. So that's why I think that metamagic is one of the overlooked strengths of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but let me turn the conversation over to you. Do you think that Paizo has delivered the best version of metamagic in fantasy RPGs through the system that they use in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, or do you think that there is a better way for it to be done? Jump down into the comments section and let me know. While you're down there, let me know what some of the other overlooked strengths of the system are that you would like to see me cover in this series. By the way, in case you think I'm being too much of a Paizo fanboy, don't worry. I'm also working on some scripts for some areas of Pathfinder 2e where I felt like Paizo fell short, and I do want to take a look at some of the ways that I think they could have handled aspects of their game better as well, so that should be coming down the road too. Don't forget to do all the YouTube stuff. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. You can check out my free Discord and my Patreon. Both of those are linked in the video description. And I do promise, as soon as I'm better, I am going to get back to my usual video setup, because I know this setup's a little bit rough. In any case, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of the conversation. Have a wonderful day.